The emergency beacon screamed across the void of space, cutting through the static of a dozen dying civilizations. Commander HFY of the Galactic Defense Coalition pressed his four-fingered hand against the communication console, his purple skin darkening with stress as the message repeated for the 1,000th time. This is Admiral Kethmori of the Velrian Republic. Our worlds are burning. The Devourers have broken through the Andromeda Line. We've lost 47 systems in the past cycle. If anyone receives this transmission, we are requesting immediate military assistance. Send us anything you have. Fighters, cruisers, dreadnoughts, anything that can fire a weapon or carry troops. We're being annihilated. HFY's mandibles clicked nervously as he studied the tactical display. Red dots, representing Devourer fleets, spread like a cancer across the Outer Rim territories. The insectoid aliens had appeared 3 cycles ago from dark space, beyond the galaxy's edge, bringing with them technology that made even the Coalition's most advanced warships look like children's toys. "Sir," Communications Officer Yilessa called from her station, her crystalline voice tinged with desperation. "We're receiving similar distress calls from the Hegemony, the Trade Federation, and the Outer Colonies. The Devourers are attacking on all fronts." The bridge of the Coalition flagship Harmony fell silent, except for the constant ping of incoming distress signals. Every species in the galaxy was crying for help, but nobody had anything left to give. The Coalition's fleet had been reduced to a mere 300 vessels from the original 10,000 that had set out to stop the Devourer advance. "What about the humans?" asked Tactical Officer Brentar, his scaled head turning towards HFY. The Earth delegation mentioned they had defensive capabilities during the last council meeting. HFY's laugh was bitter. "The humans? Brentar, they've been spacefaring for less than 200 standard years. Their entire military consists of patrol boats and mining vessels. They don't even have proper energy weapons, still using projectile firearms and chemical rockets. But they did join the Coalition," Yilessa pointed out. "They must have something to offer." "They joined for protection and trade opportunities," HFY replied, waving a dismissive hand. "Their homeworld is in the inner systems, far from any real threat. They've never seen actual combat on this scale." The thought of humanity's primitive technology made HFY almost smile despite the dire situation. During the Coalition's first contact with Earth, their representatives had arrived in a ship that was barely capable of faster-than-light travel. The vessel was made of crude metals and relied on fusion reactors that were laughably inefficient. The humans themselves were even more primitive, bipedal mammals that still required atmospheric suits to survive in most galactic environments. Yet something about the human delegation had impressed the Coalition Council enough to offer them associate membership. Perhaps it was their enthusiasm or their strange optimism in the face of a universe that had shown them just how small and insignificant their species truly was. "Sir," Yilessa's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The Velrian Republic is transmitting again. The Devourers have reached the Proxima system. Admiral Kethmori estimates they have less than 6 standard hours before their capital falls." HFY closed his eyes and felt the weight of command crushing down on him. In 6 hours, one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations would cease to exist. The Velrians had been exploring space when most species were still discovering fire. Their libraries contained knowledge spanning millions of years. Their artists had created works of beauty that could move beings to tears across species barriers, and their scientists had unlocked secrets of the universe that benefited everyone in the Coalition. All of that would be lost when the Devourers finished consuming their worlds. "Patch me through to all Coalition vessels," he ordered, "and include the human ship in the transmission." "Sir, the human vessel Intrepid is only a small survey craft," Brentar protested. "They have a crew of 50 and no military capabilities." "Include them anyway," HFY snapped. "If we're going to make a last stand, every member species deserves to know about it." The view screen flickered to life, showing the faces of captains and admirals from across the remaining Coalition fleet. Humans, Velrians, Zephyrites, crystalline beings, and dozens of other species looked back at him with expressions of grim determination. Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Intrepid appeared in one corner of the screen, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes steady despite the chaos around them. Zexai had met her briefly during the Coalition gathering, and he'd been surprised by her calm competence despite humanity's inexperience with galactic affairs. "Fellow defenders," Zexai began, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. "The situation has deteriorated beyond our worst projections. The Devourers have broken through our defensive lines on all fronts. We have 300 vessels remaining against an enemy force that numbers in the hundreds of thousands." Murmurs of despair rippled through the communication channel, but Zexai continued. "I won't lie to you. We cannot win this war through conventional means. The enemy's technology surpasses ours in every category. Their ships regenerate damage, their weapons pierce our shields like they're made of paper, and they seem to have an inexhaustible supply of vessels." Captain Chin leaned forward on the screen. "Commander Zexai, what are you proposing?" "We make our stand at the Nexus," he replied. "If the Devourers take control of the hyperspace junction there, they'll be able to reach any system in the galaxy within days. We'll position our remaining forces and fight them to the last ship." "That's suicide," muttered Admiral Vorth of the Hegemony Fleet. "We'll be vastly outnumbered." "Yes," Zexai agreed, "but perhaps we can buy enough time for the inner systems to prepare some kind of defense, or at least evacuate their populations." The communication channel fell silent as each captain and admiral contemplated the futility of their situation. They all knew it was hopeless, but duty demanded they try. "Commander," Captain Chin's voice cut through the silence. "Permission to speak privately with you after this briefing?" Zexai was surprised by the request, but nodded. "Granted. All ships, prepare for immediate departure to the Nexus. We'll make our stand there in 18 standard hours. May the cosmos have mercy on us all." The channel closed, and within moments, a private communication request came through from the human ship. Zexai accepted it, and Captain Chin's image appeared alone on his screen. "Captain, I appreciate your willingness to fight alongside us," Zexai said, "but I must advise you that your ship isn't equipped for this kind of battle. Perhaps you should consider withdrawing to Earth and helping with evacuation efforts there." Chin's expression didn't change. "Commander, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you believe there's any chance of winning this war with conventional tactics?" Zexai studied her face, searching for some hint of what she was thinking. "No, Captain. I believe we're about to witness the end of galactic civilization as we know it." "Then I have a proposal," Chun said, her voice taking on a tone that Zexai had never heard from her before, cold, calculating, and utterly confident. "But first, I need to contact Earth Command. How long do we have before we need to be at the Nexus?" 18 hours, as I said. "But, Captain, what could Earth possibly contribute to this situation? Your world doesn't even have a proper military fleet." For the first time since he'd known her, Captain Chin smiled, and something in that smile made Zexai's blood run cold despite the desperate circumstances. "Commander, you're absolutely right. Earth doesn't have a military fleet. We have something else entirely. Give me 12 hours to get authorization from my government, and I promise you'll see something that will change your perspective on human capabilities." "What are you talking about, Captain?" Chin leaned back in her chair, and her smile widened. "Tell me, Commander, what do you know about human history? About how our species has dealt with existential threats in the past? I know you've had wars among yourselves, but nothing on an interstellar scale." "No, not interstellar," Chin interrupted. "But we've faced extinction before, and we've learned some very important lessons about survival. The first lesson is that when someone threatens to annihilate you, you don't send them a proportional response." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "You send them something that ensures they'll never threaten anyone ever again." Zexai felt a chill run down his spine. "What exactly are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting that you give me those 12 hours, Commander. And when I'm done making my calls to Earth Command, you're going to understand why humanity was really invited to join the coalition. The communication ended, leaving Zexhai staring at a blank screen. Around him, the bridge crew continued their preparations for what everyone assumed would be their final battle. But something in Captain Chen's voice, something in her absolute confidence, made him wonder if perhaps he'd been wrong about humanity's capabilities. 3 hours later, long-range sensors detected something emerging from the hyperspace lane leading toward Earth. At first, the readings seemed impossible. The energy signature was unlike anything in Coalition databases. The object was massive, easily dwarfing even the largest dreadnoughts in the Coalition fleet. "Sir," Yelessa called from her station, her voice filled with confusion. "We're detecting a single vessel approaching our position. It's enormous. Mass readings indicate it's at least 40 kilometers long." Zexhai rushed to the sensor station and stared at the readings in disbelief. "That's impossible. The largest ship in the Coalition is barely 8 kilometers long. What species builds something that massive?" "Sir," Brintar's voice was barely a whisper. "According to the IFF beacon, it's the human vessel." "That's impossible," Zexhai repeated. "The Intrepid is a survey craft. It's 300 meters long at most." But as the massive shape resolved on the view screen, there was no denying what they were seeing. The vessel that emerged from hyperspace was a monument to destructive capability, its hull bristling with weapon systems that Zexhai couldn't even begin to identify. The ship's design was angular and predatory, like some ancient beast of war brought to life in metal and energy. And on its hull, in letters large enough to be seen from orbit, was printed, "UES Retribution, Earth Defense Force." A communication request came through, and Zexhai accepted it with trembling hands. Captain Chun appeared on screen, but she was no longer wearing the simple uniform of a survey ship captain. Instead, she wore military dress that spoke of authority and experience far beyond her apparent years. "Commander Zexhai," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call about the Devourer threat." "Admiral Zexhai Stam, but you said you were a captain of a survey vessel." Chin's smile was sharp as a blade. "I am. The Intrepid is my personal transport when I'm conducting diplomatic missions. The Retribution is my flagship when we're conducting military operations. But when we had no intelligence about Earth possessing this kind of technology." "Commander," Chun interrupted, "humanity has been preparing for an alien invasion since before we achieved spaceflight. We've spent centuries developing contingency plans for exactly this scenario. The difference is that we always assumed we'd be the ones being invaded." The massive human warship moved with grace that belied its size, taking up position at the head of the Coalition fleet. As it did, Zexhai could see weapon ports opening along its hull. Hundreds of them, each one capable of mounting weapons larger than anything in the Coalition's arsenal. "Admiral Chun," Zexhai managed to say, "how many ships does Earth have like this one?" Chin's expression became unreadable. "This is our newest and most advanced vessel, Commander. We've never had occasion to field it in actual combat. So this is humanity's most powerful weapon." Chun was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Zexhai's species equivalent of blood run cold. "No, Commander. The Retribution isn't our most powerful weapon. It's our most restrained one. Earth Command thought it would be more diplomatic to begin with something that wouldn't completely terrify our Coalition allies." As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the Coalition fleet. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching Devourer Armada, over 50,000 vessels strong, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with alien menace as they prepared to consume another star system. Admiral Chun studied the tactical display for a moment, then turned back to Zexhai. "Commander, I'm going to need you to pull your fleet back to a safe distance. What we're about to do is going to generate some rather intense energy readings." "Admiral, with respect, even your impressive vessel cannot stand against 50,000 enemy ships. Perhaps we should— Commander, Chen interrupted, and her voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. Humanity has been dreaming of this moment for centuries. We've imagined every possible scenario, planned for every contingency, and prepared for every threat. The Devourers made one critical mistake when they decided to threaten Earth. What mistake? Chen's smile was the most terrifying thing Zexhai had ever seen. They gave us a target. As the Coalition fleet pulled back to what they hoped was a safe distance, the massive human warship advanced toward the approaching Devourer Armada. Its weapon systems began charging with an energy buildup that registered off the scale of Coalition sensors. And in the depths of space, 50,000 alien vessels suddenly found themselves face-to-face with a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of killing things that threatened its existence. The Devourers were about to learn why humanity had never been invaded successfully. The Devourer fleet moved through space like a living thing, 50,000 biomechanical vessels pulsing with organic energy as they approached the Nexus system. Each ship was a work of biological engineering that merged flesh with technology in ways that defied conventional understanding. Their hulls rippled with muscle-like structures that could regenerate damage in minutes, and their weapons were living things that spat concentrated death across the void. Hivemind Unit 7,340,281 processed the sensor data flowing through the collective consciousness. The approaching enemy force was pathetically small. Fewer than 300 vessels clustered around what appeared to be a single large ship of unknown configuration. The organic computer systems that served as the unit's brain calculated victory probabilities and found them to be absolute. Another world would fall. Another species would be consumed. Another civilization would become biomass to fuel the endless expansion of the Devourer collective. But something about the large vessel troubled the collective mind. Its energy signature was unlike anything in the Devourer genetic memory, which contained the absorbed knowledge of 12,000 conquered civilizations. The ship's design suggested aggressive intent, but the technology readings made no sense according to standard galactic development patterns. Hivemind Unit 7,340,281 transmitted a query to the primary command vessel, a massive bioship the size of a small moon that served as the operational brain for the entire fleet. Query: unknown vessel configuration. Request analysis. Asterisk. The response came immediately, flowing through the psychic network that connected every Devourer in the fleet. Analysis: primitive matter-based technology. Estimated threat level: negligible. Proceed with standard consumption protocols. Asterisk. The unit acknowledged the order and began coordinating attack patterns with the surrounding vessels. The Devourers had perfected the art of galactic conquest over millions of years. They would approach in a standard swarm formation, overwhelm the enemy fleet with superior numbers, then proceed to strip mine every planet in the system for useful materials and biological matter. It was a process they had repeated so many times that it had become automated, requiring minimal conscious thought from the collective mind. These new aliens would fall, just like all the others. Aboard the UES Retribution, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the command bridge and watched the approaching enemy fleet with the calm focus of a predator studying prey. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and economical. Unlike the chaotic activity on Coalition bridges during battle, the human ship's nerve center was a study in controlled aggression. Tactical report, Chun ordered. Commander James Rodriguez looked up from his station, his scarred face bearing the marks of battles fought in Earth's solar system during humanity's expansion period. 50,347 enemy vessels detected, Admiral. Mass ranges from destroyer class to super dreadnought equivalent. They're maintaining standard approach formation. Weapons status: all primary batteries are charged and ready, Admiral. Secondary systems are standing by. Point defense networks are online. Chen nodded and activated her personal communication link. This is Admiral Chun to all department heads. We are about to engage an enemy fleet that outnumbers us roughly 160 to 1. As per Earth Defense Force protocols, we will not be taking prisoners. This is an extinction-level event response. Authorization code, Omega 77 Alpha. Throughout the massive warship, veteran officers straightened in their chairs. Authorization Omega 77 Alpha meant the gloves were coming off. Every weapon system that humanity had developed during its bloody history of warfare was about to be brought to bear against a hostile alien species. In the missile bays, automated systems began loading warheads that contained technology derived from Earth's most destructive weapons programs. The nuclear arsenals that had once threatened to destroy human civilization had been refined and improved over centuries of development. What emerged were weapons capable of cracking planets. In the energy weapon banks, capacitors charged with power drawn from contained antimatter reactions. The beam weapons mounted on the Retribution could vaporize asteroids in single shots, and the ship carried enough ammunition to level entire continents. But it was the experimental weapons that made the Retribution truly dangerous. Hidden within the ship's armored hull were devices that humanity had developed not for conquering space, but for defending against the nightmares that space might hold. Weapons designed by minds that had spent centuries imagining the worst possible threats and then engineering solutions to destroy them. Admiral, Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Park called from her station. The Coalition fleet is requesting permission to assist in the engagement. Chun shook her head. Denied. Tell Commander Zexhai that his ships are to maintain their current distance and observe. What we're about to do will be educational for our allies. She turned to her tactical officer. Rodriguez, what's the enemy's estimated time of arrival? 14 minutes, Admiral. They're maintaining approach speed and showing no signs of defensive maneuvering. They think this will be easy, Chun observed, a cold smile playing across her features. They've been conquering primitive civilizations for so long that they've forgotten what a real fight looks like. Orders, Admiral? Chun walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship-wide communication system. Her voice echoed through every corridor and compartment of the massive warship. Attention all hands. This is Admiral Chun speaking. Today, humanity faces its greatest challenge since our species first looked up at the stars and wondered what waited for us in the darkness. An alien force has threatened to annihilate not just Earth, but every civilization in this galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in throughout the ship. They call themselves Devourers, and they have consumed 12,000 worlds. They believe that because they have destroyed so many others, they can destroy us too. They are wrong. In the crew quarters, seasoned Marines check their weapons and armor. In the engineering sections, technicians made final adjustments to systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Throughout the ship, 3,000 human beings prepared to do what their species had always done when faced with extinction: fight back harder than their enemies thought possible. We are the descendants of survivors, Chun continued. Every human aboard this ship carries the genetic legacy of ancestors who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. Our species has survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and countless wars. We have never been conquered because we have never stopped fighting. The enemy fleet was now visible on the main view screen, a vast swarm of organic ships that blotted out the stars. To most species in the galaxy, such a sight would have inspired terror and despair. To the humans aboard the Retribution, it represented something else entirely: a target-rich environment. These aliens think they understand warfare because they can overwhelm primitive defenses with superior numbers. They're about to learn the difference between conquest and war. Today, we show them why Earth has never been successfully invaded. Chun switched to the tactical command frequency, and her voice became crisp and professional. All departments, prepare for engagement. Weapons free. Rules of engagement are simple. Destroy everything that moves. Admiral, Rodriguez reported. Enemy fleet is entering extreme weapons range. Hold position. Let them get closer. The Devourer fleet continued its approach, confident in its overwhelming numerical superiority. Their ships pulsed with anticipation as they prepared to unleash living weapons against the strange alien vessel that dared to stand against them. Hivemind Unit 7,340,281 monitored the tactical situation and found it incomprehensible. The single large enemy ship was making no attempt to retreat or call for reinforcement from the small fleet behind it. Instead, it simply waited, as if the approach of 50,000 warships was of no concern whatsoever. Perhaps this species was too primitive to understand the magnitude of the threat they faced. It would make the conquest easier, though less satisfying. The Devourers preferred prey that fought back. Fear and desperation added flavor to the biomass they harvested. Query: enemy vessel maintaining position. Recommend immediate attack. Asterisk. The response from the command ship carried overtones of amusement. Acknowledged. Begin consumption protocols. Preserve central vessel for analysis. Asterisk. The Devourer fleet spread into attack formation, their living weapons beginning to charge with bioelectrical energy. In moments, they would unleash a coordinated assault that had shattered the defenses of countless worlds. Enemy fleet spreading to attack formation, Rodriguez reported. Range: 2 million kilometers and closing. Still too far, Chen replied calmly. Patience, Commander. We want them committed to the attack before we respond. Admiral, at this range our weapons won't. Trust me, Rodriguez. The enemy fleet continued its approach, weapons beginning to glow with alien energy. At this distance, coalition vessels would have already been retreating or desperately trying to establish communication with the attackers. The human ship continued to wait with predatory stillness. Range: 1 million kilometers. Enemy weapons are charging. Now it gets interesting, Chun said, and keyed her tactical frequency. All hands, prepare for engagement. Fire control. You have permission to engage at your discretion. In the depths of the Retribution, targeting computers that have been built according to specifications developed during Earth's most devastating wars acquired locks on enemy vessels. The ship's artificial intelligence, codenamed Ares, began calculating firing solutions with processing power that exceeded the entire computational capacity of most coalition worlds. Range: 500,000 kilometers. Enemy fleet is accelerating. Let them come, Chen said quietly. The Devourer fleet surged forward, ready to unleash the same overwhelming assault that had crushed resistance across 12,000 worlds. Their bioweapons reached full charge, and 50,000 alien ships prepared to destroy the single vessel that stood between them and another conquered system. But as the range closed to 300,000 kilometers, something unexpected happened. The human ship fired first. What erupted from the Retribution was not the directed energy beams or projectile weapons that characterized most galactic militaries. Instead, the ship unleashed a coordinated barrage of weapons that had been designed according to principles that most galactic civilizations had never even considered. The first wave consisted of what Earth military planners called relativistic kill vehicles. Projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed using magnetic rail systems that ran the entire length of the ship. Each projectile carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, and the Retribution launched 300 of them in the first salvo. The Devourer fleet's defensive systems were designed to counter energy weapons and conventional projectiles. They were not prepared for weapons traveling at 30% of light speed. The relativistic projectiles tore through biomechanical hulls like they were made of paper, each impact releasing enough energy to vaporize everything within a kilometer radius. 50 Devourer ships died in the first 3 seconds of combat. The second wave was even more devastating. The Retribution's main battery consisted of particle beam weapons that had been developed from Earth's research into controlled fusion reactions. These beams didn't just pierce enemy hulls. They caused matter itself to undergo nuclear breakdown at the atomic level. When the beams struck devourer vessels, the ships simply ceased to exist. Where once there had been massive bioships, there were now expanding clouds of radioactive plasma. Another 100 ships died in the next 5 seconds. But it was the third wave that truly demonstrated the difference between human military thinking and that of every other species in the galaxy. From hidden launch bays throughout the Retribution's hull came weapons that looked like conventional missiles, but contained warheads based on principles that had been theoretical until human scientists made them practical. The warheads were quantum disruption devices, weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces holding matter together. When they detonated, they didn't just destroy their targets. They caused local breakdowns in the fabric of space-time itself, creating temporary black holes that sucked in everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius before evaporating in bursts of Hawking radiation. 200 more Devourer ships vanished into gravitational anomalies that briefly twisted space before disappearing. Aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony, Commander Zexhai watched the battle through sensors that could barely comprehend what they were recording. In 15 seconds, the human ship had destroyed 350 enemy vessels using weapons that shouldn't have existed according to established galactic physics. "Sir," Yelesa called from her station, her voice shaking. "Are we recording this correctly? The energy readings from the human weapons are impossible," Zexhai finished. "I know." On screen, the battle continued with mechanical precision. The Retribution moved through space like a living thing, its weapons systems tracking and destroying Devourer ships with ruthless efficiency. The alien bioships tried to return fire, but their organic weapons were designed for the energy levels typical of galactic warfare. Against the human vessel's defensive systems, they might as well have been throwing stones at a fortress. The Retribution's point defense network consisted of thousands of small weapon systems that created overlapping fields of destruction around the ship. Any projectile or energy beam that approached the vessel was met with concentrated fire from multiple systems simultaneously. The result was a defensive barrier that seemed impenetrable. But what truly horrified Zexhai was the systematic nature of the destruction. The human ship wasn't just winning. It was methodically exterminating the enemy fleet with the same dispassionate efficiency that a farmer might use to eliminate a pest infestation. "Commander," Brentar said quietly, "the humans are using weapons that violate at least 12 galactic conventions on military technology." "I don't think the humans signed those conventions," Zexhai replied, unable to look away from the slaughter taking place on his screen. The Devourer fleet, meanwhile, was discovering that their overwhelming numerical advantage meant nothing against an enemy that could destroy dozens of ships with each weapon's discharge. The biomechanical vessels that had regenerated damage from conventional weapons found themselves simply erased from existence by weapons that attacked matter at the quantum level. Hivemind Unit 7,340,281 transmitted frantically to the command ship as its neighboring vessels disappeared around it. Status: critical losses. Enemy capabilities exceed all projections. Request immediate retreat authorization. Asterisk the response carried overtones of disbelief and growing alarm. Negative. Continue attack. Overwhelm target through saturation assault. Asterisk, but saturation assault was impossible when the enemy could destroy hundreds of ships faster than the Devourers could coordinate attacks. The human vessel moved through their fleet like a predator among helpless prey, its weapons reaching out to claim victims with terrifying regularity. In 20 minutes of combat, the Retribution had destroyed over 2,000 Devourer ships without suffering so much as a scratch on its hull. The alien fleet that had seemed so overwhelming just minutes before was being systematically dismantled by a single human warship. And Admiral Chun was just getting started. "Rodriguez," she called to her tactical officer, "I think we've made our point. Time to end this." Admiral Chin's smile was the expression of an apex predator that had finished playing with its food. "Activate the Kasaba howitzer array." Throughout the Retribution, weapon systems that had never been used outside of computer simulations came online. The ship's entire central section began to reconfigure as massive mechanical systems moved into position. What emerged from the ship's belly was a weapon that looked like something from humanity's most violent nightmares. A directed nuclear explosion system that could focus the energy of multiple fusion warheads into a single, coherent beam of destruction. When the Kasaba howitzer fired, it unleashed the equivalent energy of a stellar flare in a focused beam that was only a few hundred meters wide. The beam swept across space like the finger of an angry god, and everything it touched simply ceased to exist. 1,000 Devourer ships died in the space of 3 seconds. The remaining enemy fleet finally broke. Bioships that had never retreated from battle in the entire history of their species suddenly found themselves fleeing in all directions as their collective consciousness finally understood what they faced. They weren't fighting a military vessel. They were fighting a weapon of mass extinction that had been designed by a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of killing things that threatened its survival. Admiral Chun watched the fleeing aliens with satisfaction. "Let a few of them escape," she ordered. "I want them to report back to their leadership about what happens when you threaten Earth." As the last few Devourer ships disappeared into hyperspace, Chin opened a communication channel to the Coalition fleet. "Commander Zexhai, this is Admiral Chun. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We can begin recovery operations for any escape pods or survivors." Zexhai's image appeared on screen, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "Admiral, what did we just witness?" "You witnessed humanity's response to an extinction-level threat, Commander. My species doesn't believe in proportional responses. When someone threatens to annihilate us, we annihilate them first, completely, permanently, and in such a way that anyone else watching understands the consequences of making the same mistake." Chun paused, studying the alien commander's face. "I hope this demonstration has been educational for the Coalition. Earth takes its membership responsibilities very seriously. No member of our alliance will face extinction while humanity has the power to prevent it." "Admiral," Zexheim managed to say, "how long has Earth possessed this level of military capability?" Chin's expression became unreadable. "Commander, what you just saw was one ship conducting a limited engagement using restrained force levels. Earth has been preparing for alien contact since before we achieved interstellar travel. We always assumed that contact would be hostile. And if we had been hostile during first contact, then this conversation wouldn't be taking place, Commander. Your species would be a historical footnote in Earth's xenobiology databases." The communication ended, leaving Zexhai staring at a blank screen as he tried to process what he had learned. Humanity hadn't joined the Coalition seeking protection. They had joined to keep an eye on potential threats while deciding whether the galaxy's existing civilizations were worth preserving. The universe had just become a much smaller place. And somewhere in the depths of space, the surviving Devourer ships fled toward their home territory with news that would reshape their entire civilization's understanding of galactic politics. They had encountered something worse than themselves. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council convened in the secure chambers deep within Citadel Station, the massive space fortress that served as the political heart of galactic civilization. Representatives from thousands of species gathered in an amphitheater that could house beings as diverse as the crystalline Zephyrite and the gas-based Ethereal Collective. But today, all attention was focused on the small section reserved for the human delegation. Admiral Sarah Chun sat calmly in her chair, flanked by 2 other humans who had arrived on diplomatic transport vessels just hours after the Battle of the Nexus. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's chief xenobiologist, and General Patricia Hayes, commander of Earth Defense Force Strategic Operations. Their presence at what had been called an urgent review of recent military actions suggested that humanity had been expecting this conversation. Council Speaker Veltar, a towering insectoid being whose species had mediated galactic disputes for over 10,000 years, activated the chamber's translation systems, and began the session. This emergency council has been called to address the recent military engagement between Earth Defense Forces and the entity known as the Devourer Fleet. Before we begin formal proceedings, I must note that the methods employed during this engagement have raised significant concerns among member species. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as delegates shifted uneasily. Many of them had reviewed the sensor recordings from the battle, and what they had seen challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of galactic warfare. Admiral Chun Veltar continued, "The Coalition Council recognizes Earth's decisive action in defending against the Devourer threat. However, we must also address concerns about the weapons technology employed by your forces. Several council members have requested clarification about Earth's military capabilities and intentions." Chun stood smoothly, her expression neutral as she faced the assembled delegates. Speaker Veltar, honored council members, Earth appreciates this opportunity to clarify our position and capabilities. We understand that recent events may have been surprising to some of our allies. Ambassador Krell of the Hegemony, a reptilian being whose species had dominated military technology for millennia, leaned forward in his seat. "Admiral, our analysis of your weapons technology suggests capabilities that exceed anything in galactic databases. How long has Earth possessed these systems?" Ambassador Krell, Chun replied, "Earth has been developing defensive technologies since our species first achieved spaceflight. We have always operated under the assumption that the galaxy contained threats far beyond our initial comprehension." "That doesn't answer the question," interrupted Ambassador Tyrix of the Trade Federation, her aquatic form rippling with agitation in its environmental suit. "Your ship employed weapons that appear to violate fundamental principles of galactic warfare conventions. Quantum disruption devices, relativistic projectiles, directed nuclear fusion beams. These are theoretical technologies at best." Chen's expression remained unchanged. "With respect, Ambassador, they're only theoretical to species that haven't been motivated to make them practical. Earth has had significant motivation." Dr. Webb stood to address the council, his academic bearing contrasting sharply with Chen's military demeanor. "Honored delegates, perhaps I can provide some context for Earth's technological development. When my species first detected radio signals from galactic civilizations, we realized we were neither alone nor particularly advanced compared to the galactic standard. This discovery prompted a massive shift in our planetary priorities." He activated a holographic display showing Earth's technological progression over the past 3 centuries. "Our species dedicated enormous resources to developing technologies that could ensure our survival in a universe filled with potentially hostile civilizations. We studied every conflict in recorded galactic history, analyzed every military technology we could detect, and designed countermeasures for threats that existed only in our imagination." The display showed research facilities hidden throughout Earth's solar system, massive industrial complexes on the outer planets, and defensive installations that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever constructed. "The result," Dr. Webb continued, "is a technological base that prioritizes survival over exploration, defense over expansion, and preparedness over optimism. Earth's entire industrial capacity has been oriented toward ensuring that our species could defend itself against any conceivable threat." Ambassador Zexhai, representing the Coalition military forces, raised a tentacled appendage. "Dr. Webb, our preliminary analysis suggests that your single vessel could have defeated the entire pre-war Coalition fleet. How many ships does Earth possess with similar capabilities?" The chamber fell silent as delegates waited for the answer. Chen exchanged glances with General Hayes before responding. "Admiral Zexhai, the U.S. Retribution is our most advanced vessel, but it is not unique. Earth maintains a fleet of 143 ships of similar or greater capabilities." The silence that followed was deafening. 143 vessels, each capable of single-handedly destroying fleets that had taken centuries to build. The implications were staggering. Ambassador Krell's scales flushed a deep red, indicating extreme agitation. Admiral, are you telling this council that Earth has been concealing a fleet capable of conquering the entire galaxy? No, Ambassador, Chen replied firmly. I'm telling you that Earth has built a fleet capable of defending the galaxy against threats that might seek to conquer it. There is a significant difference. But the weapons you employed, Ambassador Tyrix pressed, they represent technology that could reshape the balance of power in galactic politics. Why was this capability never disclosed during membership negotiations? General Hayes rose from her seat, her weathered features bearing the scars of battles fought in Earth's outer system during the colony expansion period. Ambassador Tyrix, would you have disclosed your most classified military secrets to a species you had just met? Earth joined the coalition as observers and learners, not as conquerors. We shared what we deemed appropriate for new members. But, surely, Veltar interjected, Earth recognized that this level of military capability would be relevant to coalition defense planning. Chen's expression hardened slightly. Speaker Veltar, Earth's assessment was that the coalition had adequate forces to deal with conventional threats. Our intelligence suggested that most galactic conflict involved disputes between member species or incursions by relatively small hostile groups. The Devourers represent something entirely different. She gestured toward the chamber's main display, which showed tactical recordings from the recent battle. The enemy fleet that attacked the Nexus represented a force larger than anything in recorded galactic history. They possessed technology that could regenerate battle damage, and weapons that could pierce coalition shielding systems with ease. Conventional military responses were proving inadequate, so Earth took it upon itself to escalate to weapons of mass destruction. Ambassador Krell demanded. Earth took it upon itself to ensure that an extinction-level threat was neutralized before it could consume the rest of galactic civilization. Chen replied, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Our analysis indicated that without immediate action, the Devourer fleet would have overrun the coalition within 6 standard cycles. Dr. Webb activated another holographic display, this one showing projections of Devourer expansion patterns. Our xenobiological assessment of the enemy suggests they're not motivated by territory or resources in any conventional sense. They appear to be driven by an imperative to consume and convert all biological matter they encounter. Negotiation was never an option. The display showed mathematical models of galactic consumption, with red zones spreading across star maps like a cancer. At their observed rate of expansion, the Devourers would have reached core coalition worlds within 18 cycles. Assuming they maintained their demonstrated ability to adapt to conventional defenses, total galactic consumption would have occurred within 50 cycles. Ambassador Thyrix's aquatic form rippled with what her species displayed as deep thought. Dr. Webb, these projections assume that coalition forces would have been unable to develop effective countermeasures. Ambassador, Dr. Webb replied, our analysis of coalition military technology suggests that you are already employing your most advanced weapon systems against the Devourers with limited effect. The enemy's biological technology appeared to be specifically designed to counter conventional energy weapons and defensive systems. General Hayes stepped forward. The harsh reality, honored delegates, is that the coalition was fighting a war of survival against an enemy that had evolved specifically to overcome the types of defenses that galactic civilization had developed. Conventional weapons were insufficient, so Earth's solution was to employ unconventional weapons, Veltar observed. Weapons that, I must point out, caused casualties on a scale unprecedented in modern galactic warfare. Chen's expression remained steady. Speaker Veltar, Earth's solution was to employ sufficient force to ensure that the threat was eliminated completely and permanently. Half measures against an extinction-level threat are worse than useless. They simply delay the inevitable while allowing the enemy to adapt and evolve. But the scale of destruction, Ambassador Krell protested. 50,000 ships destroyed in a matter of minutes. The loss of life must have been enormous. Ambassador, Chen replied, our xenobiological analysis suggests that the Devourers operate as a collective consciousness with minimal individual identity among their biological units. From their perspective, the destruction of their ships was equivalent to having some of their organs removed. Unfortunate, but not personally traumatic in the way that individual-based species would experience it. Dr. Webb nodded in agreement. Furthermore, allowing the Devourer fleet to continue its advance would have resulted in casualties numbered in the trillions as they consumed entire planets. Earth's actions prevented a level of destruction that would have made the recent battle appear insignificant by comparison. The council chamber buzzed with side conversations as delegates processed the implications of what they were hearing. Many species were struggling to reconcile their image of humanity as primitive newcomers with the reality of a civilization that possessed weapons capable of reshaping galactic politics. Ambassador Zexhai spoke up again. Admiral Chun, I must ask directly, does Earth consider itself bound by coalition military conventions and treaties? Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering her response carefully. Admiral Zexhai, Earth considers itself bound by coalition principles and committed to the mutual defense of member species. However, we reserve the right to determine our own response to extinction-level threats against coalition members. That's not the same thing, Ambassador Krell pointed out. No, it isn't, Chen agreed. Earth will not allow galactic civilization to be destroyed because of limitations placed on our defensive capabilities by conventions designed for a different type of warfare. When conventional methods prove inadequate, we will employ whatever force is necessary to protect coalition worlds and populations. General Hayes stepped forward again. Honored delegates, I think it's important to understand Earth's strategic perspective. We are a young species that has spent our entire spacefaring existence preparing for threats we hoped we would never encounter. The Devourer invasion represents exactly the type of scenario our entire civilization has been designed to address. She activated another display showing Earth's defensive installations and fleet deployments. Earth's military doctrine is based on the principle of overwhelming response to extinction-level threats. We don't believe in proportional escalation when the survival of our species or our allies is at stake. We believe in ending threats decisively and permanently. But surely, Veltar said, Earth recognizes that this level of military capability creates concerns among other coalition members about future intentions. Chen nodded slowly. Speaker Veltar, we understand that some species may find our capabilities concerning. However, I would ask the Council to consider our actions rather than our potential. Earth has had the ability to conquer galactic civilization for over a century. Instead, we chose to join it as members and contributors. She gestured toward the tactical displays still showing the recent battle. When faced with an enemy that threatened to annihilate our allies, we could have withdrawn to defend only our own territory. Instead, we committed our most advanced vessel to defend coalition space. Dr. Webb added, Earth's goal has always been the preservation of galactic civilization, not its domination. We believe that diversity of thought and culture makes the galaxy stronger. The Devourers threaten to eliminate that diversity permanently. Ambassador Thyrix's form pulsed with what her species indicated as skeptical curiosity. Dr. Webb, how can the Council be certain that Earth's intentions will remain benevolent? Your species possesses weapons that could subjugate every civilization in the galaxy. Ambassador, Chen replied, because subjugation would defeat the entire purpose of Earth's defensive strategy. Our military capabilities were developed to protect civilization, not to replace it. A galaxy under Earth's control would be a galaxy without the diversity and innovation that makes it worth protecting. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. Furthermore, I should point out that Earth's military technology was specifically designed to counter external threats to galactic civilization. We have had no motivation to develop weapons optimized for conquering coalition worlds, because such conquest was never our objective. General Hayes smiled grimly. However, we have had considerable motivation to develop weapons optimized for defending against species that might seek to conquer coalition worlds. Any civilization that attempts to subjugate galactic civilization will discover that Earth's defensive capabilities extend well beyond what you observed in the recent engagement. The implications of that statement sent ripples of unease through the council chamber. If Earth's most advanced warship represented restrained force levels, what other capabilities did humanity possess? Ambassador Krell's scales had shifted to a pattern indicating deep thought. Admiral Chun, what assurances can Earth provide that its military capabilities will only be employed in defense of coalition interests? Chun considered the question carefully. Ambassador, Earth can provide the same assurances that any coalition member provides. Our word, our actions, and our commitment to the principles that bind our alliance together. Beyond that, I would point out that Earth's actions during the Devourer crisis demonstrate our priorities clearly. But verification, Ambassador T-Rex pressed. How can a council verify Earth's military capabilities and ensure they remain purely defensive? Ambassador, General Hayes replied, Earth is willing to provide technical briefings on our defensive systems to appropriate coalition military authorities. However, we will not compromise the security of technologies that exist specifically to protect coalition civilization from external threats. Chen added, I would also point out that any inspection or verification regime would need to be mutual. If the Council wishes to examine Earth's military capabilities, we would expect similar transparency from all coalition members regarding their own classified defense systems. The suggestion caused another wave of nervous conversation throughout the chamber. Most coalition species maintain classified military programs that they would be reluctant to disclose, even to allied civilizations. Veltar raised a primary appendage to restore order to the chamber. Admiral Chun, Dr. Webb, General Hayes, the Council appreciates Earth's cooperation in addressing these concerns. However, I must note that several member species have requested additional time to analyze the implications of recent revelations. Shin nodded. Of course, Speaker Veltar. Earth understands that these revelations require careful consideration. We remain available to answer questions and provide clarification as needed. There is one additional matter, Veltar continued. Intelligence reports suggest that surviving Devourer vessels have retreated to their home territory. Earth's analysis of the threat level posed by this development would be valuable. Dr. Webb and General Hayes exchanged glances before Chen responded. Speaker Veltar, Earth's assessment is that the surviving Devourer forces will likely regroup and attempt to develop countermeasures for the weapons technologies they encountered. However, our intelligence suggests they will also be forced to reconsider their expansion strategy. How so? Ambassador Zexhai asked. The Devourers appear to have operated under the assumption that they were the apex predator in galactic space, Dr. Webb explained. Their entire civilization was structured around the concept of consuming other species without facing meaningful resistance. The recent engagement demonstrated that this assumption was incorrect. Chun continued, Earth's assessment is that the Devourer Collective will now be forced to acknowledge that galactic civilization possesses defensive capabilities that exceed their offensive ones. This may lead them to abandon their expansion efforts entirely or to seek some form of accommodation with coalition forces. And if they choose neither option, General Hayes asked. Chen's expression became cold as deep space. Then, Earth will be forced to take more direct action to ensure that the threat is eliminated permanently. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications of that statement. Earth's idea of more direct action apparently involved weapons that could destroy entire fleets in minutes. What would they consider appropriate for eliminating a threat permanently? Ambassador Krell finally broke the silence. Admiral, when you say eliminate permanently, what exactly do you mean? Chen met his gaze steadily. I mean exactly what you think I mean, Ambassador. Earth will not allow the galaxy to live under the constant threat of extinction. If the Devourers cannot be deterred from their expansion, They will be stopped by whatever means necessary. The cold finality of her words sent a chill through the assembled delegates. Humanity had just announced, in diplomatic language, that they were prepared to commit genocide if necessary to protect galactic civilization. And everyone in the chamber understood that they possessed the technological capability to carry out that threat. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place for anyone who threatened Earth's allies. But also a much safer place for everyone who called themselves Earth's friends. #send us anything. We're being annihilated. Humans sent a star destroyer in the depths of dark space, beyond the edge of the galaxy where no stars cast their light. The Devourer home clusters pulsed with activity unlike anything seen in their millions of years of existence. Massive biomechanical structures that dwarf planets floated in the void, connected by living conduits that carried information and resources between the various components of their civilization. The Great Mind, a collective consciousness that encompassed billions of individual units spread across thousands of bioships, processed the data streams flowing from the survivors of the Nexus engagement. For the first time in recorded memory, the Devourer Collective was experiencing something that smaller species might have called fear. Unit 7,340,281, now designated as primary witness after being one of the few to observe the human weapons in action, interfaced directly with the Great Mind's central processing nodes. The memories it shared were unlike anything in the collective's vast database of conquered civilizations. Assessment: enemy technology exceeds predictive parameters by a factor of 12,000%. Weapons capabilities suggest matter manipulation at quantum level. Defensive systems appear impenetrable to conventional assault. The Great Mind processed this information alongside similar reports from other survivors. The picture that emerged challenged everything the Devourers understood about galactic civilization and their place within it. For millions of years, they had been the ultimate predator. Their biotechnology could adapt to any threat, regenerate any damage, and overwhelm any defense through superior numbers and relentless assault. They had consumed 12,000 civilizations without ever encountering meaningful resistance. But the engagement at the Nexus had lasted 23 minutes and resulted in the destruction of 96% of their assault force. 50,000 bioships reduced to scattered atoms by weapons that seemed to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. Query: analysis of human technological base required. Threat assessment must be recalculated. The response came from the deep archives, ancient data repositories that contained the absorbed knowledge of every civilization the Devourers had ever consumed. Search complete. No technological precedent exists in archives. Human capabilities appear to be unique development outside standard galactic evolution patterns. This was troubling information. The Devourers had always relied on their ability to analyze and counter enemy technologies by drawing upon the accumulated knowledge of conquered species. If human weapons were based on principles unknown to galactic civilization, standard adaptation protocols might prove insufficient. Query: probability of successful assault against human home system. The calculation took longer than usual as the Great Mind processed variables that had never before required consideration. When the answer came, it sent shockwaves through the collective consciousness. Y of successful assault: 0.0003%. Estimated losses: total fleet destruction. Probability of human retaliation against home clusters: 99.7%. For collective intelligence that had never contemplated the possibility of defeat, these numbers were incomprehensible. The Devourers faced a species that not only could defend itself effectively, but could potentially threaten their entire civilization. Strategic paradigm shift required. Traditional expansion protocols appear ineffective against human defense capabilities. Deep within the biomechanical depths of the primary command cluster, ancient processing systems that had not been activated in millions of years began to come online. The Devourers were being forced to consider strategies they had never needed before: caution, negotiation, and perhaps even retreat. But the great mind was not prepared to accept defeat without exploring all available options. If direct assault was inadvisable, other approaches might prove more successful. Initiate deep reconnaissance of galactic political structures. Identify potential leverage points for indirect pressure against human alliance network. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the effects of Earth's intervention were rippling through coalition space in ways that no one had anticipated. The news of humanity's decisive victory against the Devourer fleet had spread through diplomatic channels with unprecedented speed, and the reactions varied dramatically depending on the species involved. On Velria Prime, capital of the Velrian Republic, Admiral Keth Mori stood before the assembled Senate and delivered a report that would reshape his civilization's strategic thinking for generations. Honored senators, he began, his aged features bearing the weight of recent revelations. I must inform you that our previous assessments of galactic military capabilities were fundamentally flawed. The human species possesses technology that exceeds our most advanced theoretical projections. The Senate chamber, a magnificent hall that had hosted diplomatic discussions for over 10,000 years, fell silent as the implications sank in. The Velrians had always considered themselves to be among the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Senator Veltichwises, whose family had served in military leadership for dozens of generations, leaned forward in her seat. Admiral, our intelligence report suggests that a single human vessel destroyed an entire Devourer fleet. How is this possible? Senator, the human warship employed weapons based on principles that our physicists claim should be impossible to implement safely. Quantum disruption devices, relativistic projectiles, and directed nuclear fusion systems that focus stellar-level energy into coherent beams. He activated a holographic display showing the tactical analysis of the engagement. The destruction was not merely overwhelming, it was absolute. The human vessel eliminated targets faster than our sensors could track individual kills. Senator Morgeth, representing the Military Oversight Committee, stood slowly. Admiral, what are the implications for Republic defense planning? Keth Mori's expression became grim. Senator, if the humans were hostile to the Republic, our entire fleet would be insufficient to defend a single system. Our most optimistic projections suggest that a human attack would succeed within hours regardless of our defensive preparations. The silence that followed was profound. The Velrian Republic had spent millennia building a military force capable of defending against any conceivable threat. The realization that such preparations were meaningless against human technology forced a fundamental reconsideration of their place in galactic politics. However, Keth Mori continued, Earth's actions suggest that their military capabilities are oriented toward defending coalition interests rather than pursuing conquest. Their immediate response to the Devourer threat demonstrates a commitment to galactic security that extends beyond their own territorial interests. Senator Veltis nodded thoughtfully. Admiral, what do you recommend for our diplomatic posture toward Earth? Senator, I recommend that the Republic formally acknowledge Earth's role as the Coalition's primary military defender and offer full cooperation with human defense initiatives. Attempting to compete with their military technology would be futile and expensive. Instead, we should focus on areas where Velrian expertise can complement human capabilities. Similar conversations were taking place throughout Coalition space as civilizations struggled to understand the new galactic reality. Humanity's demonstration of overwhelming military superiority had shifted the balance of power so dramatically that established diplomatic relationships were no longer relevant. But not all reactions were positive. In the private chambers of the hegemony's ruling council, a very different discussion was taking place. Supreme Commander Rathkar, whose species had dominated galactic military affairs for over 5,000 years, paced angrily before the assembled leadership. His reptilian features displayed the aggressive posturing that had made the hegemony feared throughout known space. The humans have made fools of us all, he snarled, his words carrying the weight of personal humiliation. For centuries, we have presented ourselves as the premier military power in the galaxy. Now we discover that a primitive species from the Outer Rim possesses weapons that make our entire fleet obsolete. Defense Minister Krelthax, whose scales had flushed deep red with anger, stood to address the council. Supreme Commander, our analysis suggests that human military technology represents a paradigm shift in warfare. Their weapons appear to be designed specifically to counter the types of defenses that galactic civilizations have traditionally employed. Which means, Rathkar replied coldly, that they have been preparing to fight us long before we ever met them. The humans joined the coalition not as supplicants seeking protection, but as predators studying potential prey. The implications of this assessment sent ripples of unease through the council chamber. If humanity had been planning aggressive action against galactic civilization, their membership in the coalition would provide perfect cover for intelligence gathering and strategic positioning. Supreme Commander, asked Intelligence Director Vex Mori, what evidence supports this assessment? The evidence is their technology itself, Rathkar replied, gesturing toward the tactical displays showing recordings of the human weapons in action. No species develops quantum disruption devices for defensive purposes. No civilization builds weapons capable of destroying entire fleets unless they intend to use them aggressively. He activated additional displays showing human diplomatic communications from the past several decades. Furthermore, review their communication patterns. The humans have been asking detailed questions about coalition military capabilities, defensive installations, and strategic resource distribution. This is intelligence gathering, not innocent curiosity. Defense Minister Krelthax's scales shifted to patterns indicating deep concern. If your assessment is correct, Supreme Commander, the coalition may be harboring a species that intends to conquer galactic civilization from within. Exactly, Rathkar confirmed. The humans used the Devourer threat as an excuse to demonstrate their military superiority and establish themselves as the dominant power in coalition space. Now, they are positioned to dictate terms to every other civilization. The council fell silent as members processed the implications. If humanity's true intention was galactic conquest, their current position within the coalition would make resistance extremely difficult. They had established themselves as protectors and allies while simultaneously demonstrating capabilities that made opposition futile. What do you recommend? Asked Economic Director HFY Sisura, whose concerns about trade relationships with Earth had been mounting since the recent revelations. Rathkar's expression became calculating. We must assume that the humans intend to use their military superiority to gradually subjugate coalition civilizations. Our response must be to form a defensive alliance of species committed to maintaining galactic independence. But, Supreme Commander, Intelligence Director Vex Mori pointed out, any such alliance would be ineffective against human military technology. Their demonstration at the Nexus proved that conventional weapons are useless against their defenses. Not necessarily, Rathkar replied, his voice taking on the tone of someone who had identified a potential weakness. The humans demonstrated overwhelming superiority against Devourer biotechnology. But they have never faced coordinated assault by multiple coalition fleets employing diversified attack strategies. He activated tactical displays showing potential engagement scenarios. If we can coordinate simultaneous attacks from multiple directions using varied weapon systems, we might be able to overwhelm their defensive capabilities through sheer volume of diverse threats. Defense Minister Krelthax studied the projections with growing excitement. Supreme Commander, this strategy would require absolute coordination between multiple fleets and perfect timing of attacks. The logistics would be extremely complex, but achievable, Rathkar confirmed, if we can convince enough coalition members that humanity represents a long-term threat to galactic independence. The key is to act before the humans realize that we've identified their true intentions. Unknown to the hegemony leadership, their private communications were being monitored by intelligence systems that they had never detected. Deep within coalition space, automated monitoring stations that appeared to be standard communication relays were quietly recording and analyzing diplomatic traffic from across the galaxy. The data streams flowed through quantum communication channels to processing centers hidden within Earth's outer system, where artificial intelligence systems more advanced than anything in galactic databases analyze the conversations for threat indicators. When the hegemony's discussion reached Earth Command, the response was immediate and decisive. Within hours, additional human vessels were being deployed to strategic positions throughout Coalition space, and contingency plans that had been theoretical were suddenly becoming operational reality. Admiral Chun received her new orders while the Retribution was still conducting recovery operations at the Nexus. The message was brief and carried authorization codes that indicated maximum priority. Admiral Chun, this is Earth Command. Intelligence indicates potential hostile action by hegemony forces against coalition interests. You are directed to implement Protocol 77 Delta and prepare for possible engagement with coalition member species. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for any forces that threaten Earth vessels or allies. Chun read the orders twice before activating her command frequency. The situation was evolving exactly as Earth's strategic planners had anticipated. Humanity's demonstration of military superiority would inevitably lead some species to attempt preventive action against what they perceived as a threat to their own dominance. Commander Rodriguez, she called to her tactical officer, I need you to run diagnostics on all weapons systems and verify readiness status for extended combat operations. Admiral, are we expecting additional Devourer attacks? No, Commander, Chin replied, her expression becoming grim. We're expecting something much worse. We're expecting to fight people who should be our allies. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's weapons were just as effective against coalition vessels as they were against alien invaders. The crisis came to a head 3 weeks after the Nexus engagement, when long-range sensors detected the largest fleet movement in galactic history. Over 15,000 ships from 17 different coalition member species were converging on the Terran system, ostensibly for joint training exercises, but clearly intended as a show of force against humanity's growing influence. Supreme Commander Rathkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Domination, and surveyed the assembled armada with satisfaction. Representatives from the hegemony, the Crystalline Collective, the Outer Rim Confederacy, and a dozen other civilizations had answered his call to demonstrate galactic unity against the human threat. Communications, he ordered, open a channel to all fleet commanders. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the faces of military leaders from across known space. Each species represented had contributed their most advanced warships and their most experienced commanders. Together, they commanded enough firepower to reduce entire solar systems to rubble. Fellow defenders of galactic freedom, Rathkar began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Today we take action to preserve the independence of our civilizations. The humans have demonstrated technology that threatens the balance of power that has maintained peace for millennia. We cannot allow them to use their military superiority to dominate galactic politics. Admiral HFY Mech of the Crystalline Collective, her form shimmering with the aggressive patterns her species displayed during combat, leaned forward on screen. Supreme Commander, intelligence reports suggest that additional human vessels are moving toward this system. Should we be concerned about their defensive capabilities? Admiral HFY Mech, Rathkar replied confidently. Our combined forces represent the greatest concentration of military power in galactic history. Even human technology cannot overcome such overwhelming numbers employed in coordinated assault. He gestured toward tactical displays showing the fleet formations. We have positioned our forces to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously while maintaining sufficient separation to prevent their weapons from affecting multiple targets with single shots. The humans demonstrated their capabilities against a concentrated enemy fleet. They have never faced a dispersed assault by coordinated coalition forces. Fleet Admiral Kestra of the Outer Rim Confederacy, her scaled features displaying skeptical concern, raised a question that had been troubling many of the assembled commanders. Supreme Commander, what if the humans attempt to negotiate? They're still coalition members, regardless of our concerns about their intentions. Admiral Kestra, Rathkar replied coldly. Our intelligence suggests that the humans have been planning aggressive action against coalition civilizations since before they joined our alliance. They use their membership to gather intelligence about our capabilities while concealing their own. This is not a misunderstanding that can be resolved through diplomacy. The assembled commanders nodded in agreement, though many still harbored private doubts about the wisdom of attacking a species that had demonstrated such overwhelming technological superiority. But Rathkar's arguments were persuasive, and the alternative, accepting human dominance of galactic affairs, was unthinkable to civilizations that had ruled space for millennia. All ships, Rathkar ordered, prepare for engagement. We will approach the Terran system in formation and demand that the humans withdraw their fleet to defensive positions around their homeworld. If they refuse, we will demonstrate that galactic civilization will not be intimidated. 15,000 warships began their final approach toward Earth, their weapons systems charging as they prepared for what their commanders believed would be the most important battle in galactic history. They were absolutely correct, though not in the way they expected. Deep within the Sol system, hidden among the asteroid fields and outer planetary orbits, humanity's true defensive capabilities were coming online. What the approaching fleets detected as additional human vessels was actually the awakening of a defensive network that had been under construction for over 2 centuries. Admiral Chun stood in the command center of Luna Base, Earth's primary military coordination facility, and watched the tactical displays with the calm focus of a predator that had anticipated this exact scenario. Around her, the most experienced military minds in human history coordinated a response that would reshape galactic civilization permanently. Admiral, reported Captain Morrison, Earth Defense Force Strategic Intelligence. Enemy fleet composition confirmed. 15,437 vessels representing 17 coalition member species. They're maintaining dispersed formation and approaching on multiple vectors. Weapon status. Chen asked. All defensive platforms are online and ready, Admiral. Orbital battle stations report full readiness. Fleet units are positioned according to Plan Omega 9. Chen nodded and activated the system-wide communication network. This is Admiral Chun to all Earth Defense Force units. We are about to engage coalition member species in defense of Earth sovereignty and galactic stability. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for any hostile forces that enter Terran space without authorization. Our objective is not conquest, but demonstration. We will show our former allies why attacking Earth is the worst mistake they could possibly make. She paused, considering the magnitude of what was about to happen. All units, remember that we are fighting to preserve galactic civilization, not to destroy it. Use minimum necessary force to neutralize threats, but do not hesitate to escalate if faced with overwhelming assault. The galaxy is watching, and our response will determine the future of interstellar relations. As the enemy fleet crossed the outer boundary of the Sol system, hidden defensive installations throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets revealed themselves. What had appeared to be mining stations and scientific outposts suddenly deployed weapons systems that dwarfed anything mounted on conventional warships. The asteroid belt itself had been hollowed out and converted into a massive defensive network, with each major asteroid housing weapons platforms capable of engaging targets across the entire system. The outer planets have been transformed into fortified positions with orbital defense grids that could coordinate overlapping fields of fire. But it was the revelation of humanity's true fleet strength that sent shockwaves through the approaching armada. From hidden bases throughout the system emerged vessels that made the Retribution look like a reconnaissance craft. Massive dreadnoughts over 100 kilometers long, their hulls bristling with weapons that had never been tested outside of computer simulations. carrier vessels that deployed swarms of automated fighters programmed with artificial intelligence that exceeded the computational capacity of entire civilizations. And at the center of it all, emerging from a concealed base within Jupiter's atmospheric layers, came a vessel that defied comprehension. The